Hi everyone! So let's get started with our book. So in this video we're going to go over the prologue and chapter 1. So you can go ahead and follow with me if you have this copy. I'll tell you which page numbers I'm on. I haven't seen any other different cover paperbacks. Alright, so the prologue. Here we see that it's September 2006. Now if we turn back a page, we'll see the copyright page. And this is always found on the back of the title page. This is the title page with author, title, publisher. Then on the next page, we have the copyright. And so this says copyright 2009, so that's when this book came out. Okay, so we can see that it's roughly, this prologue is roughly around the time when the book was published. It's as much up to date as possible. So we see that it's September 2006, that's our date. We're in Northeast Park in Gibsonville, North Carolina. And Ron is there meeting Jennifer. Ron has his daughter Raven there, and they're cheering on Jennifer's 16-year-old daughter Brittany. And then they break for a lunch. And you can tell from how they explain things that Ron kind of sticks out. He doesn't have the same kind of packed lunches that the other moms do. And one busy mom, nosy mom, decides, oh, hey, where's your husband, Jennifer? How do you two know each other? And so that's where this story starts, where 22 years ago she had accused him of raping her. And then on the next page we have this inscription found on the Confederate statue that's outside of the courthouse where this case happened. We will talk more about this Confederate statue in chapter 4, okay? So just kind of put a note in there for that. Alright, so in chapter 1, she gets right into where she is in her life at that time. She's living in Burlington, North Carolina. She walks to school every day. She's in college. She's 22 years old, and when she walks, she's very focused on her study cards, so she doesn't really pay attention to her surroundings. But then one night in July 1984, she remembers seeing someone smoking outside of her place. And she's going to school there at Elon College. She's taking summer classes. She also teaches aerobics at a business. And on the day right before this rape happened, she and her boyfriend Paul went browsing at a shopping mall. They went to play tennis. They were hungry, went out to a Chinese restaurant, and then they went to a friend's party where she got a severe headache. So he takes her home, gives her water, aspirin, rubs her back, she falls asleep, and he says that he slipped out of her place at 11 o'clock. Okay, so that was all in the first 3 pages, chapter 1. So then at 3 a.m. then is when a noise awakens her. She's not quite sure what's going on. And then she thinks she feels something brush her arm, and then finally she sees some unknown figure next to her bed. Alright, and he immediately gets on top of her. Now, her first thought is that this is a robbery, that he was just trying to rob her, and she woke up and disturbed him, and so she's thinking, okay, I know where my keys are, I know where money is, he can take all of that. But time is distorted during this time for her, and then she realized, oh, this isn't a robbery, this is a rape. And her body goes very rigid, and she's trying not to disconnect from herself. She says, I need to think in this moment. How can I get out of this moment? And so then he starts talking to her, and this is on page 14. And he says, your man's overseas in Germany, ain't he? So he thought that her brother who was staying with her was the boyfriend. And he knows her name, knows where she's from, and so he knows things about her. So this isn't just a random, I choose this house and I'm going to rape this person. He's been following her for a while. And so here she's like, I'm alive, I'm breathing. She smells his cigarette smoke that's on him. He assumes that she has glasses because she can't see anything. Like for me, I always have to wear my glasses. I can't see anything without them. But for her, she only needs the glasses if she's looking long distance, okay? So up close, she can see just fine. And so that's what she's trying to do here. She's trying to remember every single detail of his face. She says, I willed myself to note the details. I studied his face for features to identify. The hairline, his awful mouth. Did he have scars, tattoos? Remember the scars part for later. Okay, so she studied his face. Then she's trying to connect with him on a human level to keep him talking. But what she doesn't realize is the phone lines were cut. He cut those. So she's trying to casually get away from him, release the tension in the room. Maybe he'll start believing her, trusting her, that sort of thing. So she's like, I've got to get up, I've got to go pee. Okay, so she goes to the bathroom, turns on the light to try to get another good look at him, but he immediately sees what she's doing and has her turn it off. Then while she's in the bathroom, she realizes, this isn't a safe place for me, I can't get through the window, I'm trapped, so I got to get back out. So she goes back out into the hallway with a blanket on because she's basically just got underwear on. And so then she talks him into, hey, I'm afraid of knives, will you at least put that down? Just take it outside. Okay, so she's thinking he'll go out the front door, he'll completely leave the house and put it outside so that she can lock the door after he gets out. But he doesn't do that. He stays in the door frame of the front door and just places the knife outside. So she's like, I'm thirsty, I want to go to the kitchen because there's a back door. And then she sees pictures and things have been gone through, so clearly he was going through stuff before she woke up. He even asks if he can keep a picture of her. And so it's at that point he realizes, oh crap, there's the back door. Is that back door locked? And that's when she bolts out the back door. Now she goes to the first place that she can, but it's 3:30 in the morning. It's going to take a minute or two for someone to wake up. And so she bounces on that door. She goes to the next house where there's a light on. So she's pounding, she's saying, help me please, I've been raped by a black man, he's after me. Well, the man inside screams. That, I guess, frightens him, but the wife says, no, I recognize her, let's bring her in. So they get her inside, shut the door, they call 911, she faints, and they also see the rapist walking around the house. And so here, time's a little different for her. She knows she's in an ambulance, she knows that her clothes have been changed, she's in different clothes by the time she gets to the hospital. And then the doctor comes in. So the doctor has been awoken in the middle of the night, so he's not happy about it. She says he's sloppy and unsympathetic. I didn't want him to touch me. I felt like a dead girl watching another strange man plump my body, humiliated. And that's when she realizes her body is the evidence. And so think about that, especially for rape victims. A lot of people, they just, when it happens, after it happens, they immediately want to go wash. They want to wash it all off of them. And that's a normal reaction to that. But in our day and age, if we want to make sure that we catch the person who did this, we need the evidence. And unfortunately, the victim's body is that evidence. So in this case, she wasn't, he didn't leave her. She was left alone where she ended up going to the shower. She was with someone else. They got her immediately to the hospital to do a rape kit. And while she's there, she meets the detective, Mike Godlin. And then she learns that there was a second victim that night. Okay, so it's no longer her, it's now us. Okay, so she's not the only one in this. And she's asked if she could recognize him, and she says yes. Once she knows that it's not her, not just her, she knows that it's up to her, she's going to recognize him. Her boyfriend gets called, and so he ends up taking her to the police station, and already in the car, they're not really talking. She says he was rumpled and quiet. This is on page 21 at the bottom. He was rumpled and quiet. It was a lot for a 25-year-old guy to take in, especially one like Paul who had his whole life mapped out. Well, what about her? This is the thing as you read through this. She's always, oh, I'm so sorry for Paul having to deal with this. But what about you? You were the victim. You were the one who dealt with this. So really, kind of, when you read through this, see how Paul treats her and acts. So already on the way to the police station that night, that morning, there's already a difference between the two. And then they get to the police station. She ends up talking to her mom on the phone. And what does her mom kind of assume? Oh, you were wearing, did someone see you in your leotard when you were at work? So her mom's making the assumption that it was because of what you wore, that's why this happened to you. And hopefully in 2020, we all know that it does not matter what a person wears, does, drinks, acts like, nothing. Nobody is ever asking to be raped. And then she has to give a taped interview, and she doesn't want Paul to hear it, but she's like, I'm going to kill two birds with one stone here because I don't want to have to repeat it to him later. And so she's able to talk to Mike, the detective, but she can't look at Paul. And then she makes a composite sketch. It's not perfect. She says at the bottom of page 23, this isn't very good. But then she finds out that the other victim, the second victim, she can't identify. She can't do it. So now that's more pressure on her to make sure that she gets the rapist who raped both of them. And then she finds out, oops, that hospital screwed up with her rape kit, and so now they have to take her to a different hospital where hopefully they can get that done. So already you've been raped, you've been humiliated with the first rape kit, you've had to explain all of this in front of your boyfriend, you made a composite sketch, and now you have to go through the humiliation of another rape kit because the first hospital screwed up. So that's a lot for anyone to take in. They end up going back to her place to see if there's anything else that's out of place that she can recognize. She didn't want to live there anymore. She always wanted to be independent and alone, but she's like, I don't know if I can do that anymore. And so it was no longer her place, she felt. She was the type of person who was always kind of clean. She always picked up after herself, and they find some foam rubber on the floor. And so that is a piece of key evidence that will be used at trial, she says on page 26. So that's a little bit of foreshadowing to say of what's to come. All right, and so then what happens that night, or that morning? Paul ends up taking her back to his parents' house. And think about this. This is how his mom responded. She looked equally displeased with the knowledge of her rape, as if it was a secret that Jennifer should have kept. I wondered if being raped by a black man made me a less desirable prospective wife for his son. I mean, how horrible is that? And think back to the documentary that you watched last week, True Justice, where they talked about the film Birth of a Nation. That was that old film, 100 years ago, that basically brought up the KKK. It's one that the KKK feels is their triumphant movie. And it was about a black man trying to rape a woman. And what did that woman do? She didn't allow him to rape her. She just killed herself instead. So that's kind of like, okay, should I have killed myself instead of having this done to me? You know, it's really a big slap in the face. And then, you know, if you're raped, you probably don't want to be left alone. But oh no, the mom says, no, Paul can't stay with you. You have to be alone. So there she is trying to get sleep, which her body needs, but she's worried because the rapist is still out there. All right. So that is the prologue in chapter 1. On Cobra, in the folder for videos for prologue in chapter 1, there's one video I want you to watch. It's called 5 Things to Say to Survivors of Trauma. And this is any kind of trauma. And so these are 5 things that are very interesting. Ask yourself, does anybody actually say these to her in this book? Okay. And there's actually a 6th one that someone actually mentioned in the comments to that video. They were a victim themselves, and they said, I really appreciated it when someone said that it wasn't my fault. Okay, so take a look at those. Think of how we acknowledge what happens to each other, to victims in this case, what we say and how we say it. And that can be very impactful for how people either they deal with something like this in their life, whether they can overcome it or they end up having problems for the rest of their lives. All right, if you have any questions about prologue and chapter 1, please email me and let me know, and then move on to chapter 2.